Welcome back to Building Research Resilience. Let me try that again. Welcome back to Building Research Relevance. My name is Stephen Schaub, the chair of the Department of Educational and Counseling Psychology at McGill University. I'm also a school psychologist by training. And today I'm just going to make a little bit of a case for why we need to engage in a lot more big team science, which I kind of like that phrase, but we always used to just call them research consortiums. And research consortiums are really a increasingly common idea in all of research. And this is because the old days of the lone genius making giant strides in a field aren't really, it's just not really possible. Now, it is possible for a solo person to come up with an idea. And certainly if you're engaged in some activities such as mathematics or poetry or an area like that, it is very possible to make a single person who has learned from previous research and mentorship and whatnot, that single person could be an idea or could make an idea that would be valuable. And in psychology and education, it's the same way. A single person can make an idea work. However, as we've learned about, if we're going to be relevant, it's not just enough to know something is a good idea, but it works. It works for a lot of different people under a lot of different circumstances, under many different conditions, at certain age levels. That's a lot of work. It's not just developing an idea or a concept or a theory, testing with correlational methods, testing with randomized control trials, testing with replications, with reproductions, seeing how robust something is. So a simple idea, one person can come up with it. But the fact that we need to do so much before an idea is ready to implement is really becoming a big problem. And as I mentioned before, how we do things in science, because there are academic incentives to be that sole person, what tends to happen, someone has an idea, they write a book about it, they may or may not research it, they do a TED Talk, they create a website, they sell consultation, and this is how and then you write a lot of papers just about how it works and how everybody loves it. Is there any evidence? No, not really. Is it really useful? Does it move the field ahead? Not for anyone except the person who came up with the idea. If we're serious about making research relevant, what we really need to do is create teams. The big team science approach is something that's been used in many fields. We're seeing it. There's a good special education consortium. I believe that's stationed out of North Carolina. I think it's Jeff Green and a few folks out there doing some really nice consortium work. This has a lot of advantages, and I'm just in that initial stages of developing a school psychology consortium in Canada. And why this is important is simple. And I got derailed on it by having to become department chair, so I didn't really have a chance to follow through. But my term is ending soon, and I can't wait to get this started. But the idea is simple. One is a big problem in school psychology research, especially working with children with disabilities, is that all of our interventions and ideas have extremely low power. This is simply because one person in one location cannot have access to thousands of people with cerebral palsy or with Down syndrome or autism spectrum disorder of various types. It's really hard to get those groups. What we could do then is create a consortium of people who are agreeing to work on topics. And if somebody has an idea in one part of Canada, let's say somebody in Newfoundland has this wonderful idea, but they can't get enough participants to give this any power. What they can do is bring that idea to the consortium. People who are interested in this idea can follow the protocol, take the protocol. Hopefully the consortium can provide them with a little bit of seed money to get that started. And then they can conduct this same protocol in Toronto, in Montreal, in Gatineau, in Abbotsford, and all of these places around the country. And what this will do is a couple of things. One is it expands the power. The power of the study becomes extremely large simply because we have more participants. The second thing it does is it helps expand relevance because of diversity. The population in Northern Ontario is not the same as the population in Quebec City. So you can see you're actually expanding with, in one way of looking at it, is as conceptual replications, the exact same protocol, but with different participants in different part of the country with different experiences. This simply adds to the robustness and generalizability of the basic idea. So you're adding power, you're adding relevance with diverse ideas. You're also working with other professionals who may have some interesting ways to add to the original idea. So it's not really something that's static, it's something that can be a dynamic approach. This is really a feature of whether you want to have replications or simply expanding the power. So a consortium really has this advantage of selecting what could be the key research findings. And of course, in Canada, school psychology is a fairly small profession. And by doing a consortium and having this big team science, people can pick and choose which ideas they wish to add to the consortium. They can pick or choose which areas they wish to go into and receive seed funds for. This is extremely helpful because many of our universities are in rural areas and are not part of those real research universities. So if you're in a rural area, in a small college, it's hard to get your own research program started. A consortium would be a way for us to, one, access some of these rural areas, and two, provide funding for the people who work in those areas who may not have the resources to conduct big studies. So it's good for science, it's good for scientists, and it's good for the profession of school psychology, because when you start putting together this collection of work that we're doing, we're creating a professional identity of work together. When I originally thought of this idea, I sent it out to, I shouldn't say, it sounds like it's not an original idea on my part. Other people have done it in other fields. But when I sent this information out to other psychologists, it was really nice to have 44 people signed on and were interested in it, and then I had to kind of put it on hold for a while. So I plan on getting back to this and creating this team. But big team science comes with a lot of headaches and challenges. It almost is creating a new bureaucracy. A new bureaucracy is really tough. It's, how do we get funding for it? How do you share authorship? If that person in Newfoundland comes up with this brilliant idea, yet other people in other places are collecting data, how are the publications going to be put out? Who's going to be authors on those publications? Will the original person get somehow more credit because they are the original person with the idea, where other people are just following the protocol? So authorship needs to be very clear. Funding needs to be very clear. The adjudication of ideas from which the consortium will choose to consider also has to be an idea. But this could be a great way if we have a good system in place to manage authorship, to manage funds, to manage credit, to manage what ideas the consortium will accept as part of the process. This would be an ideal situation for advancing the field. Also, it's a good idea that you could actually have consortia available or parts of the consortium where students might find master's thesis in here is to tag on to some of the replications and ideas. The other part that we're going to be working on is develop a home for an open access repository of findings from the consortium. Because one of the big deals is that many times findings that we have are in journals that people may not have access to. Even if they're free access, there's many people in parts of the country who don't really look to literary journals as a source of information. We could simply make this consortium a big source of an access where anyone can find information about how we did our studies. These studies will kind of fall in line with that clinical research model that we have earlier that I talked about. I can't remember which issue it was now. It was When do we know that research is ready for the real world? So all that information will be there, including a set protocol on how exactly you implement something. So implementation would be a big aspect of it. I talked a little bit about hybrid research designs. We want as many studies in the consortium to have an open research. Now I forgot what I was going to say there. We want them to have many as possible. See, I'm writing this raw and I'm not editing these, so expect some stammer. But as many research as possible to have a hybrid research design so we actually know implementation strategies. Once the implementation strategies are out there, then teachers, psychologists, policymakers, other people who work in education and in mental health will have access to the ideas that are generated by the consortium, free access, not part of the gold package of open access issues in journals that we have to pay lots of money for, but simply a repository that's permanent. We'll probably try to affix that to a university like McGill, and hopefully we can have this repository too. So the ideas of this big team science is really important for complex ideas that involve development of new ideas, testing new ideas, implementing new ideas, and finding that they work across the country and have sufficient power to be useful and are accessible. All at once, this big team science can really be effective in those regards. But in another aspect is people who have a hard time really doing science because they're at smaller universities, even at colleges or CEGEPs or places like that, where research isn't a big part of what they do, and they certainly don't have the resources to do it. They can kind of move into the consortium and get ideas there and get a little bit of funding for it. So this will be one of our big projects over the next 2 years that we're working on in my lab, is to create a big team science consortium of school psychology across Canada. And by doing so, I'm hoping to make research a lot more relevant and a lot more widespread than it is right now. I just fear that for many people who would love to do research, who might be in school boards, if you're from the US, we call them school districts, but they may be in school boards that research isn't a thing, or it's small colleges or CEGEPs where research isn't a thing. Let's make it a thing. Let's make it easy for people to get involved. Let's make it easy for people with good ideas to get those ideas out and replicated and get those protocols working. In that case, the big team science approach is going to be a very effective mechanism by which to make research relevant, research accessible, and research activity something that is within the realm of possibility for many talented scholars. So, big team science, School Psychology Consortium, look for it because we will be working on that over the next 2 years as we try to build some infrastructure to make research more resilient. Thanks very much. Have a good day, and we'll see you soon. Bye-bye.